Colleagues, I'm delighted to be with you here today, albeit through virtual means, but I hope that this provides us an opportunity to share thoughts on supply chains. Right now, we live in a world where the vast supply of photovoltaics and of ancillary equipment comes from one country. This creates a problem in the supply chains. And as we have seen since the last quarter of 2020, there has been a increase in the price of solar components instead of the 10-year decline continuation that we expected to occur. Why is this happening? We believe that this is because of two reasons. To some extent, it is because of speculative prices. But by far and large, the single largest reason is that the shipments from China to the rest of the world today are about 40% more than they were 2 years ago. And a year ago, they were 100% more than they were 2 years ago. This implies that concentration of manufacturing in one part of the world is always susceptible to the kinds of logistics and the availability of shipping modules compared to the growth of the market across the world. Today, we are seeing that the market across the world is growing. Uh, you have seen the kinds of ambitions that the world has. There is a large number of countries, something like 80 countries, which have already announced net zero goals. Most of them have net zero goals by 2050, but some have 2060, even 2070. But the point is, these are all within, in a sense, spitting range. What it implies is we will start seeing a demand. No, not we will start. We've already started seeing an increase in demand occurring globally. As Brazil, for example, requires more than 70% of the electricity to come from PV and wind in 2050, it implies that the South American demand would suddenly mushroom somewhere from about the 2030s, certainly from 2035 onwards. The Indian goal of achieving 500 gigawatts of renewables by 2030 implies that this would become a large market. The US goal implies that the North American market would become very large. In addition to this, we are seeing growth occurring in almost every part of the world, every country of Africa, certainly all countries of Europe, and in Southeast Asia. As this occurs, therefore, there will be a growth in demand. We are seeing that the expectation of growth is that we will see at least 5 gigawatts of demand, if not something of the order of 11 gigawatts by 2030, and demand in the range of a minimum of 14 gigawatts, but it could be as much as 80 gigawatts by 2050. Why this range? This range largely depends on how quickly internal policies are put in place, and particularly internal policies for the production of hydrogen. Hydrogen requires a lot of energy, and therefore, the kinds of capacities that will develop will largely depends on how quickly the electrification of the economy is occurring. But compared to the 2 gigawatts of capacity that we have right now, these are large numbers. It also implies that we will need a global basis for manufacturing. It also implies that the technological basis of the industry has got a much larger room for change. We are seeing, for example, already that the monoPERC technology that is currently the basis of the largest amount of the world's production of photovoltaic cell is already on its way out. We are seeing heterojunction technology, AGT technologies coming in. We are seeing TOPCon technologies coming in. We see now, for example, in the labs, uh, monocrystalline plus perovskite kinds of modules providing efficiencies of 30% or more. Agreed that these are in the lab. Agreed that these are very small scale, but what it implies is that in the 5 or 6 or 7 years that we are looking to the future, we will probably see these 30% efficiency cells come into the market. This will be a huge difference from the current efficiencies. The best efficiencies that we get in the market are about 22, 23%. This means that investment in these newer technologies has to start occurring today. The fact that we do this in multiple markets makes it that much more viable. Because the amount of investments that have been done already in the production of photovoltaic cells or modules, particularly, imply that if any other country wants to set up modules, they will have to meet the additional costs. This is being met through mechanisms like the production linked incentive in India or the Inflation Reduction Act mechanisms of production tax credits in the US and so on. The key challenge continues to be on how to ensure that geographical diversification occurs across the globe. At the International Solar Alliance, we have rather conveniently divided the production capacity into three different parts. The first is silicon to polysilicon, the second is polysilicon to wafers or cells, and the third is cells to modules. Now, cells to modules can occur almost anywhere. It is quite possible, for example, that the cells for two modules could occur in almost any uh, developing country which has got adequate industrial infrastructure. They, the economies of scale are relatively small and certainly can meet a large country's demand and even a region's demand. It is also much cheaper to transport cells from one country to the other rather than transport modules from one country to the other. Cells can be stacked one over the other. Modules, on the other hand, have got cells which are this thick and then modules which are this thick. In other words, there's a lot of air being transported, and hence a lot of volume goes up in transporting this air rather than the cells themselves. This makes it very viable to have cell to module manufacturing facilities across the world. The problem is much more acute when we are looking at the silicon to polysilicon or the polysilicon to the cell manufacturing facilities. There, the economies of scale are much larger, and more importantly, they also require nanosecond kind of reliability in electricity supply. This is where the incentives are most needed. As the International Solar Alliance, we are committed to providing the kind of information, the kind of support, and the kind of interventions that could make sense both from a national point of view as well as from a risk point of view as far as the dispersion or the say or the logistics, the global logistics of global supply chain management are concerned. As we move ahead, we see that there are at least three main approaches to building a manufacturing system. The first, and for the lack of a better word, I'll call it the Me Too syndrome. This uses a combination of incentives, uh, the domestic content requirements, and of tariffs, etc., to build up module manufacturing industries. This is largely based on what happened in China. And the point is that the goal is that it will move up the supply chain. This is occurring in various countries, but the problem with it is that there are no inbuilt incentives for more efficient technologies to come in. The domestic content requirements almost ensure that we are stuck on a particular model of efficiency for at least foreseeable future till the policies change and bring in requirements for more efficient technologies. The second approach is technology leaping. Now, here, investment in an innovative technology leapfrogs to the next generation. So, for example, we have seen companies buy out startups which create new technologies. For example, there is a company, a large company, which is getting into this area, and they are buying out startups which use heterojunction technology instead of the current monoperc technologies. So they are uh, going straight to the HGT without going through the monoperc route. This obviously is addressing the technologies of tomorrow, not just the technologies of today, and in a sense is a more sustainable approach, but it requires an industrial ecosystem to be able to support it. The last is to support niche industries. For example, solar panels require glass. They require The system requires inverters, and we have seen that we have particularly people who focus on polysilicon manufacturing. We have people who focus on perovskites. We have seen people who focus on glass. These, in a sense, use the kinds of technologies and processes that are needed for the solar systems to occur, but they kind of lock themselves into a niche environment. This has both advantages and disadvantages. You can take up a large part of the market and an increasing part of the market. But if there is a disruptive competitor who comes in, then it could spell disaster for you. The point that I'd like to leave with you is that whatever is the technology that is being developed in a country, it needs an ecosystem behind it which can obviously provide, on the one hand, the demand, and on the other hand, the kinds of competitive technologies for tomorrow. I again want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. And again, I would very much have liked this to be in person, but I'm delighted that at least we are able to meet virtually. Thank you very, very much.